Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, all the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to the Candidate Forum for Districts 7 and 15 of the Virginia House of Delegates. This forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of the Fairfax area. We look forward to a lively and respectful discussion of the issues. The League of Women Voters is a 105-year-old nonpartisan organization that never supports nor opposes candidates or political parties. This forum is co-sponsored by 9 other nonpartisan organizations. These organizations are committed to supporting the democratic process by providing opportunities for voters to hear directly from the candidates. We particularly thank the viewing audience. This is what American democracy looks like at its best, an opportunity to examine the issues factually, ask questions regarding the issues most important to us, and explore the candidates' positions. I am Alpha Woolen, and I am the moderator. If you want to ask questions, call the number on the screen. The time will be displayed by, we will use as many questions as possible in our allotted time. Each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement. The order was determined by the order on the ballot. After opening statements, candidates will have a question and answer segment where each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond to each question. At the end of the question period, candidates will have a 1-minute closing statement. The time will be displayed by timekeepers so candidates and I can see the time signals clearly on the screen facing the candidates, and a timekeeper will show time intervals, 30 seconds remaining, and a stop sign. The candidates for District 7 are Delegate Karen Keys-Gamarra, Democrat, and Ms. Cassandra R. Aucoin, Republican. The candidates for District 15 are Delegate Laura Jane H. Cohen, Democrat, and Ms. Saundra T. Davis, Republican. Now the opening statement from Delegate Karen Keys-Gamarra.
Good evening. I'm Delegate Karen Keys-Gamarra. I serve House District 7, which is most of Reston, parts of Oakton, and parts of Herndon. I have served my first session, and I am asking for your vote for re-election. In my first session, I have focused on listening to my constituents and serving their needs. I have collaborated with my fellow Democrats as we voted for constitutional amendments to protect your liberties, and I have championed legislation to protect our community. I passed the first bill to ban child marriage in the South. I also have worked to support public education and make sure we expand our access to health care. I look forward to serving you in the future, and I ask for your vote.
Thank you, Delegate Keys-Gamarra. Now the opening statement from Ms. Aucoin.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Cassandra Aucoin, and I thank you, the League of Women Voters, for hosting this evening. I live in Reston. I've lived there for 20 years. I'm a military mom. I'm a military spouse, and I spent over 35 years working in the Department of Defense, managing multi-billion-dollar budgets and leading some organizational reforms. Tonight, I'm running because our families are finding it harder to live here, because we have the highest car tax in the nation, new taxes, excessive tolls, rising energy bills. Our schools still have not recovered from one of the longest COVID closures in the country. Families have paid the price, with students falling behind while taxpayers are paid more. And education has become over-politicized. Recently, we heard that administrators even took students to get abortions without parental consent. I'm not a politician, but I know what matters to our community, and that's why I'm running, to reduce costs, increase public safety, and strengthen education for every family in District 7. We need major reform so families can thrive here in Fairfax County.
Thank you, Ms. Aucoin. Now the opening statement from Delegate Cohen.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Laura Jane Cohen, and I've had the opportunity for the last 2 years to get to represent HD 15, and before that got to serve on our school board for 4 years. My husband and I have lived in Fairfax County for almost 25 years and have 2 kids that are now both in college. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and our moderator, Ms. Woolley, and everybody in the booth and behind the camera. Sure appreciate all you're doing tonight. And at this moment in time, I think we can't overstate the importance of civil discourse. And so having that opportunity here tonight is just wonderful. In my first term, my Democratic colleagues and I worked hard to make everyday life better for Virginians. We expanded low-cost and free and affordable childcare, pre-K, also raised teacher salaries, helped people buy their first home, and provided over $1 billion in tax relief this year alone. I look forward to talking more about it soon.
Thank you, Delegate Cohen. And now, Ms. Davis.
Hello, I'm Saundra Davis. I live in Burke for 14 years. Before that, I had spent 5 years in Manassas. I have 3 sons, all graduated from the Fairfax County Public School System. I have 2 master's degrees, one in healthcare administration and one in gerontology. Before I chose to stay at home and raise my children, I was the director of a dementia unit in a nursing home. And I currently serve on the Public Guardian and Conservative Board. I'm a Youngkin appointee to that board, and I do enjoy my time there. And I am running because I think Fairfax County deserves diversity of thought. Out of all 30 elected officials in Fairfax County, there's only one Republican, and no groups function when everybody thinks the same.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Davis. And now for the question and answer portion of this evening, starting with Delegate Keys-Gamarra. What is your most important legislative priority, and why is this so important?
My most important legislative priority right now is a response to what has happened at the federal level. I constantly receive phone calls and messages and questions from our community. They're concerned about the upheaval that has been created by the loss of jobs and the impact that that has on our economy and the ecosystem. So as a legislator going into my next session, I'll be working with my Finance Committee colleagues, as well as those on appropriations, as well as those who help us to figure out how to make sure that our services are not hindered. We are concerned particularly about children in public education receiving the funding that they need to receive their services. We're particularly concerned about the elderly, and there are a number of needs for affordable housing, etc. We have to have a broad base to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our community, and I will also be working to make sure that we not only address public education, but that we deal with one another in a collaborative manner so that we listen to one another and listen to our constituents.
Thank you so much, Delegate Keys-Gamarra. And Ms. Aucoin.
Thank you. So I was a federal employee for almost 40 years, and so I do understand the angst that's going on right now with our federal employees. My husband served in the military for 38 years, so he also understands. I think from an economic standpoint, we really need to work hard to get them into jobs. And so I think that's a very important thing. Along with that is the affordability of living in Fairfax County. We have high taxes, high real estate taxes. We have meals tax that's just been placed on us. We also have our car tax. We're one of the few states in the country that has a car tax. So money is not in our pocket really to help us, just live day to day in our quality of life. So I believe affordability and our ability to work in our economy are very important, and that would be my number one priority. And along with that is I want to make sure that we are protecting our right to work. I know that I believe my opponent really supports the repeal of the Right to Work Act, and I think that's an important act to keep in place because no one should be forced to be in a union. And I would also fight the other issue related to affordability is our ability to get to work. I used to go to Springfield, and it would cost me, with tolls, $240 each month. Today, it's much higher, so we really have to get a handle on that. So affordability is a number one issue for me, and part of that is also, thank you. I'll stop. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Aucoin. And now, starting with Delegate Cohen, same question. What is your most important legislative priority, and why is this so important?
Thank you. As I said in the beginning of the opening, our job here is to make the everyday life of Virginians in HD 15, but all over the Commonwealth, better. And we've been able to do that together, along with my colleague, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, by lowering costs, making sure that we have a world-class public education system, and making sure that people have access to health care, making sure that they can afford and have affordable housing. Sorry, my hair was in my mic. And I think we are able to do that together. In the General Assembly, we work across the aisle. Most of our bills pass with bipartisan support, many of them unanimous. And so we know how to build bridges. We know how to make sure that whether you're in Burke, Virginia, or you're in Roanoke, Virginia, that there are a lot of shared common concerns and commonalities, and we're there to represent everybody at the table. We have this amazing opportunity to be a brick wall and push back against what's happening at the federal level, in particular with losing jobs, with abandoning all of our folks on Medicaid, making cuts to Medicare. And in Virginia, we're really going to have to do extra work to make sure that we don't let what's happening across the Potomac impact negatively our folks' lives here in Virginia.
Thank you so much, Delegate Cohen. Okay, so now for Ms. Davis, what is your most important legislative priority, and why is it so important?
So what's important to me is to not pile on what federal workers in my area have already experienced. My biggest priority, it's on my yard signs for my campaign, is to repeal the car tax. Taxes in Fairfax County particularly are rising to socialist levels. People can't afford to stay in their homes, especially if they're on fixed income. They have to move, sell their house because they can't pay the taxes. And I don't think, I think that our responsibility as state delegates is to focus on what we can control. I know that it's easy to talk about the federal level and ignore our complicity here at the state level. I also have an interest of being on the Public Guardian Board. There's vulnerable populations and caregivers and public guardians that deserve to be paid more than they are at this time. And just caregiving in general is a very important role in our society.
Thank you so much, Ms. Davis. Okay, moving on to Ms. Aucoin. Next question. With increasing costs of living, often both parents need to work.
Correct.
What can be done to provide financial assistance for childcare costs of Virginia families?
That's a great question. So my experience with this, I was actually one of those working mothers, and we were working parents. And so the availability of childcare was something that I found sometimes to be a real challenge. And then when we took my son and my daughter and moved them into a pre-K type of program, that became kind of an expensive proposition. So I really do understand the challenges that families have today. We have to, I think, work with a private and public type of situation where we work with churches, we work with businesses to have them build out some child care services within the organization. I think that's one of the first things we can do. And I think we can work on, if we have funding, we can work and targeted towards children who are of the lower income level, that they can actually utilize some state funding in order to utilize some child care service. And dovetailing on Ms. Davis's comment about caregiving, this is the same thing in child care. We don't have we really don't have a profession in child care. And I think we have to work on that and have them, bring more people in who are interested in taking care of children, and developing some incentives for them to maybe go on and become, an educator, with a scholarship or something of that nature. So those are the kinds of things I would look to enhance our child care.
Thank you so much, Ms. Aucoin. Okay, same question, Delegate Keys-Gamarra. With increasing costs of living, often both parents need to work. What can be done to provide financial assistance for child care costs of Virginia families?
I think it's important to first of all understand that education is the bedrock of our democracy. We currently have preschool evaluations for students that may have disabilities, and we try to identify those early, but we don't have universal preschool, and that's exactly what we need. Every child needs to be ready for education when they go to kindergarten, and the state should do everything they can to provide incentives for that. I have supported universal preschool since I was on the school board. But it's really critical right now because we not only have people who can't afford to have preschool, but we have families that have lost their jobs. They have to have childcare for their children now. They have to look for work, etc. And so I think that we have to make the investment to provide universal preschool. We also have to make sure that we have to train people to provide those services. This can happen as early as in high school, as we have Teach for Tomorrow and other programs of that nature, because we as a policy question have to decide that education is the thing that Virginians need to specialize in. When we provide excellent schools, we draw businesses, we draw industries. We have people have come to Fairfax County because we provide excellent education.
Thank you, Delegate Keys-Gamarra. Okay, starting with Ms. Davis, your question is, Virginia's immunization laws require vaccines for children entering public and private schools, daycare facilities, and certain higher education institutions. Should these laws be changed? Why or why not?
Well, I think there's a lot of questions about vaccines and the amount that children get in a short time. I'm happy that there's people at the national level that are looking into that closer. I think that we also have people coming to our country that don't have records, that might not be immunized. Yes. That, to have the record of people, their medical history is important too. I'm not sure I feel about that because I'm gonna be having grandchildren soon, and the amount that is required in so short of a time span is concerning to me. I'll have to think about that some more.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Davis. Okay. Delegate Cohen, same question. Virginia's immunization laws require vaccines for children entering public and private schools, daycare facilities, and certain higher education institutions. Should these laws be changed? Why or why not?
No, they absolutely should not be changed. First of all, we have to believe and trust science. And we have not only the CDC, but the American Academy of Pediatrics that gives us a lot of information that we need to be able to make these decisions. That's how we do it in Virginia. And we know in this country now, we have turned back the tide on actually having healthy kids entering our schools. We know that we have children who are dying of measles in this country for the first time in years. We are seeing diseases that we have not seen before. And it is because so many people are getting misinformation about vaccines. And the real worry is when you have people at the federal level who are putting theories that they maybe hear on morning talk shows into the narrative about science. It is dangerous for children. It's dangerous for older adults. It is dangerous for our communities that count on herd immunity to be able to make sure that our schools are the safest place possible for our kids. And so as a community, as a country, we need to believe science and trust our doctors.
Okay, thank you so much, Delegate Cohen. Next question, starting with Delegate Keys-Gamarra. Data centers have become a major point of contention in Northern Virginia and throughout Virginia. A recent report indicated that if the number of data centers continues to grow, Virginia energy demands will nearly triple by 2034. As a result, the cost of energy is predicted to rise for households. What is your view of increased regulation of data centers? What would you support?
Obviously, data centers have become a vital part of our economy. Loudoun County, for example, has been able to decrease their taxes as a result of incomes coming in from data centers. However, the concern is that individuals, people like every day at the kitchen table, are trying to figure out how to pay higher bills. And one of the Democrats last year had legislation to try to figure out what the actual costs were from data centers. Where those costs should be attributed to. Now, some of that is we are providing services certainly to a growing community, but we're also providing it to industry, and we are providing and sharing costs for the region. So we have to do a couple of things. We have to, first of all, understand where the costs are coming from. We have to make sure that we are having reasonable costs for our energy. We have to expand how we get our energy. Unfortunately, this administration believes that we should only use particular sources such as gas, but we have to continue to support clean energy such as solar. And we have to invest in small business to make sure that these various sources can help us to reduce our energy costs.
Thank you, Delegate Keys-Gamarra. Same question to Ms. Aucoin. Data centers have become a major point of contention in Northern Virginia and throughout Virginia. A recent report indicated that if the number of data centers continues to grow, Virginia energy demands will nearly triple by 2034. As a result, the cost of energy is predicted to rise for households. What is your view of increased regulation of data centers? What would you support?
So data centers are a vital part of our economy now. We have 70% of our traffic rolls through our Northern Virginia centers. And so I think the biggest issue we have going right now will be how are we going to handle the amount of input? What does our grid look like? And are we going to invest in our electrical grid? So I think that, in terms of just the mere fact of having infrastructure, we're going to have to look at some other, our grid, how we invest in that. And then we let the local areas work with the community in terms of, where data centers are placed. I don't think that we want to do too much regulation, with data centers. It is a business, but we do need to incentivize and make sure that we are able to, we want to incentivize the data centers and the organizations that use the data centers to be as efficient as they can possible. Because right now, I think we have a concern that much of the costs are going to come back to the consumer. So this is new ground. Data centers are new ground. And so I would say that we probably give it a little bit of time. Things will start to work. We'll see other ways of getting, we're going to be looking at other sources of energy. And so I think we'll give it some time. So I think right now we would not over-regulate. We'd let this system work.
Thank you, Ms. Aucoin. Starting with Delegate Cohen, your question is, in 2024, approximately 10% of Virginia's population received benefits from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP. How do you propose to address the recent SNAP reductions that will impact low-income Virginians?
I think it's criminal. I think that we have on the federal level this zeal to try to undo all we've done to create a social safety net in this country. And the idea that we think it's okay to literally take food out of children's mouths is just astonishing. So in Virginia, we rely heavily on the federal government, obviously, for SNAP benefits. We know that there are going to be some changes. Right now, we're working on reducing our error rate so that we will not have to pay an additional $90 million in a match to the program. We've been able to reduce it from 11.5% to 7% already, just by targeting some funds and work. We also know that in the school system, we have to often take on some jobs that are supposed to be outside of our responsibilities. We certainly had to do that during COVID when we wound up working with all kinds of different outside organizations, those important public-private partnerships, to have food trucks, to work with different vendors to be able to provide lunch for every student and for their families. And we have no choice. We're going to have to continue to do that and work with each county and locality to see how that gap can be closed, because it is not okay to not feed our families here in Virginia.
Thank you, Delegate Cohen. Ms. Davis, same question. In 2024, approximately 10% of Virginia's population received benefits from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP. How do you propose to address the recent SNAP reductions that will impact low-income Virginians?
Yes, I spend a lot of time at farmers markets in my campaign, and you can use SNAP at the farmers market, and I thought that was great for the fresh vegetables and fruit that they can use their benefits there for. My understanding is that the changes are adding, not necessarily cuts, but adding a work requirement, 80 hours a month, or 80 hours of volunteering, or 80 hours of educational credit to be able to remain on the program. The schools do provide nutrition. That's one of the reasons why I was an open schools advocate. They were closed for 17 months, longer than any other place in the country. And I was worried about children not being able to be fed at home during that time. That's one of the reasons that I advocated so strongly to focus on reopening schools in a timely fashion.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Okay, next question, starting with Ms. Aucoin. On the issues of gun safety and prevention of gun violence in Virginia, what legislation actions would you support, or what actions would you not support?
I believe the gun rules that we have today are good. We have good background checks. We have the red flag law, and I support the current situation. I think we need to push a little bit more on parents to store their guns so that we don't have issues like we've seen with children coming in with guns. So I really, I'm a Second Amendment person, and I respect guns. My family owns guns, and we treat them with very reverently. And so, I don't see us trying to make it more strict. I know there was a law that was attempted to be passed this past assembly to raise the age of people to 21 for rifles, instead of, right now you can have rifles and certain guns at 18, and that's in farmland, that's pretty usual. And so I would not support those kind of changes. So in an answer, I think where we are today is in a good place. I want to make sure, though, that we are taking care of our law-abiding citizens. And I just want to make one comment on who has guns and who uses guns in a bad way. It's people who are criminals. And if you look at who is 70% of the people who are in prison today are uneducated. And so I think there's a link there.
Thank you, Ms. Aucoin. Sure. Delegate Keys-Gamarra, same question. On the issues of gun safety and prevention of gun violence in Virginia, what legislative actions would you support, or what actions would you not support?
So I think it's important to, first of all, state that I support the Second Amendment. However, I do believe that there have been theories regarding what that Second Amendment actually means. I don't believe that our founders anticipated the use of AR-15 type weapons or firearms. I don't think that they anticipated school shootings. I don't think that they anticipated that children would be walking around with guns that they found that were not properly secured. So I do believe and fully support those measures that will make our homes and our schools safer. I believe that we need to make sure that, for example, I want to point out that one of the proposals from the federal government was to remove taxes on silencers. I don't understand that. How is that part of the Second Amendment? I would support making sure that we not only do background checks, but we have registration of, we know who has these guns, that we close the loopholes with respect to being able to go and buy it at some gun show, at the expo, where we don't get the same amount of information that we would otherwise get. I think that we have to focus on safety for children, safety for families, and people shouldn't have to worry about whether their children are coming home from school.
Thank you, Delegate. Okay, next question starting here with Ms. Davis. How should Virginia respond to the federal government's rollback of Medicaid expansion? How can we ensure affordable access to health care for Virginians?
So like I mentioned before, I'm not sure that it's quite a rollback. It's adding work requirements. And I think that when we are, I think that when the citizenry is taxed so high already, we need to make sure that the people that are signed up for the benefits are eligible. And when you're asking people to pay for other people, it needs to be, there has to be some kind of a way to monitor that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Davis. Delegate Cohen, same question. How should Virginia respond to the federal government's rollback of Medicaid expansion? How can we ensure affordable access to health care for Virginians?
Well, first, I would say if you have never been on Medicaid or love somebody who was on it, I hope that you will do a really deep dive and learn everything that you can. In Virginia, 1 in 5 people are on Medicaid, almost 2 million people. Of those, 800,000 are children. Many of those kids are kids with disabilities who rely on Medicaid not only for health care, but for services, for communication devices, for things that help with mobility, their speech, their physical therapy needs. And Medicaid programs are not just life-saving, they are life-changing. The truth about Medicaid is that in Virginia, 70% of the people on Medicaid do work in some form or fashion. The vast majority of those 30% remaining have a disability. These cuts are going to cost Virginia hospitals over $26 billion over the next 20 years. And as that happens, people who are sick will continue to come into emergency rooms, will continue to utilize healthcare that they cannot afford. And so what happens is that our hospitals will recoup that money by increasing costs for all of us, by increasing our insurance, by increasing the state exchange. So this problem impacts all of us, not just those people who are being removed from Medicaid.
Thank you, Delegate Cohen. Okay, next question, Delegate Keys-Gamarra. What is your stance on expanding access to early childhood education and preschool programs in Virginia, particularly in low-income communities, so that children are school-ready?
Thank you. I think I may have addressed this in a question without knowing it was going to be a question, but I fully support making sure that every child is ready to start kindergarten. Studies show that young people, young children, preschoolers who are exposed to preschool learn to read quicker. They're more ready for the math skills, and those skills continue not just for a few years, but throughout their education. The very first thing we have to do as Virginians, as far as I'm concerned, with respect to education, is to place it as a priority. When we educate our young children, when we make sure that higher education is available, we make sure that Virginia is the place where people can find employees, where they can bring their businesses, where our economies can grow, and where people have the skills that are necessary for tomorrow's future. We want to be the Commonwealth that everybody comes to, and we have so much talent. We want to hold on to that. Our educational system has to support that.
Thank you, Delegate Keys-Gamarra. And to make sure that I'm giving the panelists enough time to answer their questions, do you need me to repeat the question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What is your stance on expanding access to early childhood education and preschool programs in Virginia, particularly in low-income communities, so that children are school-ready?
So both of us addressed this in terms of, I do support early child care and early childhood education. I don't think, though, reality is that we can afford, the universal, everybody's eligible. So I would propose that we target the lower income children to get the education first and see how it goes. Now, we also need to expand on the education centers. There are churches who provide education. You could probably get some businesses. So we have to have a little bit of a mix of, I think, business and public-private venture thing. And as I said earlier, we also need to talk about the people who are actually providing that education and really working and incentivizing people coming out of college or high school in order to help out. I want to just tell you, though, our education system, though, in general, this is one of the reasons I'm running. I think our education system needs some work. The outcomes are not necessarily matching the investment. And so this is, I absolutely agree that education is incredibly important for our kids and for our democracy and for our society and for our economy. But I think where we are today in Fairfax County is we're not delivering those kind of outcomes even at the K through 12 level. And so I think we really need to take a hard look at what we're doing in all of education, including early childhood.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. Okay, so moving over to table number 2, starting with Delegate Cohen, here's your question. On the issues of gun safety and prevention of gun violence in Virginia, what legislative actions would you support, or what actions would you not support?
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I will say, as a former preschool teacher and as a member of Moms Demand Action, this is how I started this life that turned into politics, was working to get our elementary school classroom doors. And so this issue has become really near and dear to my heart. We have this opportunity. Yes, we have done some great things in Virginia. Unfortunately, for the last 4 years, we've had a governor who's vetoed almost every bill that dealt with any sort of gun violence prevention legislation, including things like making sure that it's illegal to bring a gun into the hospital, things like having the school board and school system send out parental notification at the beginning of the year, which was a bill that I carried to notify every family of their legal obligation to safely store firearms and prescription drugs, by the way, if they had minor kids at home. We have passed legislation to ban assault weapons. We've passed legislation to ban ghost guns. We've passed legislation to expand red flag laws. We've passed legislation that you can hold gun manufacturers responsible when their product is used as a weapon of war. Each of those has repeatedly been vetoed by this governor. So I look forward to the opportunity to having a governor in this Commonwealth who actually believes in gun violence prevention and working together to pass some of these really important laws to keep our kids safe.
Thank you, Delegate Cohen. Ms. Davis, do you need me to repeat the question?
Sure.
Okay. On the issues of gun safety and prevention of gun violence in Virginia, what legislative actions would you support, or what actions would you not support?
So my ears are open for legislation, like coming from both sides, no matter what it is. I don't automatically close down anything, but full disclosure, I do have a concealed carry permit. I do carry a firearm. I think the best way to tackle gun violence is to address the mental health issues that are in our communities, especially when we're not using careful language and always talking in an alarmist way. I think that we're burdening children with adult issues in K through 12. They shouldn't be fretting about Gaza and overly burdened with sexuality and overly burdened with things that just climate, things that aren't under their control. People go crazy when they have too much piled on them, and it's not age appropriate. Ms. Cohen, Delegate Cohen, could actually have her parent notification legislation. Governor Youngkin vetoed that because if we're going to be notifying parents, he said he wanted to add the amendment of Sage's law, where we notify parents if children are socially transitioning at school, and they declined.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Davis. Okay, next question, starting here with Ms. Aucoin. How should Virginia respond to the federal government's rollback of Medicaid expansion? How can we ensure affordable access to health care for Virginians?
Okay, so I understand the spirit of what our president has done. He has said that we need to look at all the programs, and if we have people on these programs that should not be on these programs, that's what the spirit was, to cut that element, to also look at inefficiency. And believe me, there's probably in an area like in many areas of government, there's probably some inefficiency. So I think the way to handle this is, that we are looking at renewal of your ability to be on Medicaid. I guess they call it renewals. That I guess requirement sounds a little onerous. Every 6 months you have to readjust. Well, there's some things that we could do, I think, to make sure that people are not so burdened down with that. And one of them is, matching up names to Social Security centers and wages. And the other thing is, I think there's a grace period that we should put there for children and people vulnerable so that we can get them back on the rolls. We recently had something like this happen in Virginia where people were not, 1 out of 4 people were knocked off the rolls, and so it takes a little time to get it back. So we have to do that. So again, I think time will tell. We'll get the people that need to be on there, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Aucoin. Delegate Keys-Gamarra, do you need me to repeat the question?
Please.
Okay. How should Virginia respond to the federal government's rollback of Medicaid expansion? How can we ensure affordable access to health care for Virginians?
Well, first let me say the current delegation, the House of Delegates, has begun this process already by establishing an emergency committee to evaluate what changes are coming down from the federal government. Unfortunately, this is a changing landscape. Even with months of evaluating what the House of Representatives and the Senate have proposed, we don't quite have the specificity that would help us to really plan. So it's going to take a number of years of closely watching what is actually implemented. Now, what has been proposed is rolling in these changes over time. Some of the largest changes happen right after midterm elections. So people may not realize that their health care will be impacted. So in the meantime, I think that once we perhaps change our leadership in the governor's office, there will be additional advocacy to try to make sure that Virginia won't be as impacted. We also can work on reducing our error rate. Unfortunately, doing so, which has been tasked to the Department of Social Services, is going to require money which has not been allocated. So we can continue to watch carefully, inform the people, and try to reduce the harm.
Thank you, Delegate Keys-Gamarra. Okay, starting here with Ms. Davis. Your question is, data centers have become a major point of contention in Northern Virginia and throughout Virginia. A recent report indicated that if the number of data centers continues to grow, Virginia energy demands will nearly triple by 2034. As a result, the cost of energy is predicted to rise for households. What is your view of increased regulation of data centers? What would you support?
So data centers do provide jobs, and they do provide the technology where we can get instant information. They do take up a lot of energy, and combined with the growth in private businesses that the governor has, we have a lot more energy needs than we expected when the Virginia Clean Economy Act was passed. So Delegate Keys-Gamarra mentioned that the governor is only interested in gas, but if you watch any of his speeches, that is not accurate. He is an everything above person. He is interested in wind, he's interested in solar, we're interested in nuclear, we're interested in natural gas, and we need to adapt to these. I mean, we're going to start having brownouts as early as this winter, honestly. The wind and the sun can't take care of all of that. And while I am concerned about the climate, we need an all-of-the-above approach to serve. Virginia is like one of the most, we're actually, we have to import our electricity at this point. We're not even creating enough of our own. We're bringing in energy from other states. And that's just a vulnerable position to be in.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Delegate Cohen, do you need me to repeat the question?
No, thank you. Data centers are here, and I think that we have come to a point where, especially with the onset of AI and all of the universes that's opening, we understand that data centers are here to stay. So at the state level, what can we do to make sure that they are not just popping up everywhere and in places where people don't feel like they're appropriate, and make sure that we look at what are some of the unintended consequences and side effects? At the state level, one of the biggest things we need to do is make sure that data centers are paying their fair share for their massive energy consumption. The ratepayers, you and I, every day should not be paying extra because data centers are consuming so much energy. So creating a new rate class for data centers so that they're paying more per megawatt usage, I fully support that. I think that's a good starting place. Another is mostly data centers are regulated by localities, but how as a state can we support localities? So ensuring that localities understand that data centers don't have to be a by right, and so that localities have the opportunity to say, this is where you can be, this is what we demand, we don't want you to be seen, we want you to recycle most of the water that you use, we'd like you to put solar on the rooftop and store it for use in other places. Also, we have an opportunity to demand that Dominion shares its solar collection battery technology to non-Dominion projects to make sure that data centers are pulling their weight.
Thank you, Delegate Cohen. Okay. Next question over here for Delegate Keys-Gamarra. This is from Finn. This is from our online viewers. Finn from Burke asks, what steps would you support to ensure that trans or LGBTQIA plus students are not bullied and are safe in school?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Finn for calling in, and I want Finn to know, as well as all of our other students, to understand that it is our goal, I believe the Democrats in the House of Delegates, as well as our school board's goal, to provide a safe and respectful environment for every student. We have attempted to pass legislation to make sure that students have an opportunity to learn about each other. I really think the best learning environment is a diverse one where we can learn to care for one another and treat each other as neighbors. We also can empower our school boards to make sure that they are monitoring how students are feeling. In Fairfax County, for example, we have surveys to make sure that students aren't feeling bullied. And there is bullying legislation. So we want to make sure that students have a voice. We want to make sure that students feel safe. And we want to make sure that students understand how much they are valued.
Thank you so much, Delegate Keys-Gamarra. Do you need me to read the question, Ms. Aucoin? Okay.
I think so. Thank you. So I believe that it's not just the LGBTQ community, but we ought to be taking care of every student and making sure they're not being bullied. So I would hope that the policies set up by the school board and by the education system would make sure and monitor all bullying. We shouldn't be bullying Jews. We shouldn't be bullying, transgender kids. We should not be bullying anybody, because the schools are supposed to be an environment where you're learning. And so I think a good example, being an example at by teachers and showing that bullying doesn't count and should not be ever tolerated is a first good step. I'm unaware of legislation that Ms. Delegate Keys-Gamarra is talking about. So I would like to get a little bit more informed on that to see if that is a viable thing that I would support too. But, we want a safe environment for our children. They should never have to go to school feeling unsafe. We have girls who go in the bathroom at one of the middle schools and they walk right back out because it's a scary place. I do think we have to look at the bathroom situation, the locker room situation, because I think that also creates some unsafe types of environment. So, but thank you for your question, and know that I'm here to support all children. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aucoin. Okay, I'm going to direct the same question here, starting with Delegate Cohen. Do you need me to ask the question again?
That's all right. Thank you.
Sure.
I think we have to spend a lot of time in the school system, sadly, thinking about bullying, thinking about who's bullying and why it's happening, trying to look at what information kids are showing up with. Sometimes they're coming from home with some really misguided ideas about who various kids are at our schools, and it doesn't make any difference if you're in the trans community, if you're in the Jewish community, if you're in the Muslim community, if you're Black, if you're brown. We have kids who are hurting right now in our schools. We have kids who come home and they're worried that their family members have been abducted by ICE. We have kids who come home and babysit all of their younger children. We have kids who come home and are wondering, how they're going to find their next meal. And so we have our kids show up at our schools, and we have to meet them where they are. No matter what they're coming with, we have to be able to help them be successful and feel successful, which can sometimes be a very different thing. So it comes with really expanding people's understanding of basic humanity and what each of us is going through and what we all bring with us when we show up, making sure that our staff understands that too and has the opportunity to really see behavior as communication, no matter what community that's coming from. We also have an opportunity to make sure that we're continuing to fund counselors and school social workers, and make sure that kids always have someone to talk to, a trusted adult, whenever they need any guidance.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Okay, and Ms. Davis, do you need me to repeat the question? Sure. Then from Burke asks, what steps would you support to ensure that trans or LGBTQIA plus students are not bullied and are safe in school?
So kids can be awful, and I do not agree with bullying at all. I was bullied as a child, so I know that feeling. I think one of the pieces missing here for trans children is that they're able to go to school and make an assertion that they are trans, and there's no requirement to have parental support on that or to even notify parents. It happened to one of my friends. Their child was socially transitioned for a year before she looked on CIS and saw a female name. That's a whole year of a child potentially being bullied where they did not have any in-home support. And I think that you need in schools care plans or special IEPs for dyslexia and any number of other things. And this one we just kind of it's very loose, and I don't think it's safe for children.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. I want to thank all of our candidates and our delegates for answering the questions. We're now moving on to the closing statements portion of the evening. Each candidate has the opportunity for a 1-minute closing statement in reverse order of the opening statement. So we will start with Ms. Aucoin.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here tonight. I believe we need to be judging our policies by results. And right now, I don't think our results are telling a very good story. Our schools still haven't recovered from one of the longest closures in the nation, and early release laws have been putting offenders back out on the street. I believe that we have an amendment that's on the table that's too broad and unsafe and leaves parents out of it. This is the Reproductive Health Act. And I believe that we are looking at potentially repealing the right to work law and raising the minimum wage. But I think my opponent agrees with that. Those are part of her platform. And that will hurt our economy and our small businesses. In my 35 years at working with the Department of Defense, in my 35 years of working Department of Defense, when programs were not working or they needed outcomes report, we decided either to terminate them or course correct them. So we can't afford to waste any taxpayer dollars, and neither can Virginia. So as your delegate, I will listen to all sides because a representative must support every constituent. I'd be honored to be your voice in Richmond. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Aucoin. Okay, Delegate Keys-Gamarra.
It says, I'm sorry, let me just mind my business. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. I'd like to thank the planners of this event, our host, and all of the organizations that made sure that this happened tonight, because making sure that democracy includes making sure that all voices are heard. I want everyone to know that I have dedicated my life to serving this community. And as a delegate, I try to do my very best at listening and making sure that I hear your voice. Right now, we are at a crossroads, and many people are concerned about the economy and a number of things. So top priorities for me are focusing on rebuilding our economy where we've had significant job loss, retraining, as well as making sure that we respect those highly skilled federal workers that have been displaced. Investing in public education and making sure that we are addressing the services that are necessary. And above all,
Cassandra.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, now starting with Miss Davis.
Again, I'm Saundra Davis, a longtime Fairfax County resident. I've knocked several thousand doors in my district myself. That's face-to-face engagement with the people who live there. And they really want the thought in government. So I understand there's a lot of emotion related to federal government and choices they've made recently, but that's not an excuse for you to ignore the records of the local politicians in our county. I need people, and I was a Democrat 5 years ago, so I know how you feel, and I have felt the way you have felt before. I need you to start watching the public meetings for your Board of Supervisors, the school board meetings, and I need you to watch on the legislature in Richmond and make logical decisions and not base everything on emotion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Okay, and now ending with Delegate Cohen.
Thank you. Thank you again to the League for this opportunity. You know, Delegate Keys-Gamarra and I are not strangers to the ugliness and vitriol and, in truth, danger in politics. During our time on the school board, we knew all too well the need to have security cameras and get to know your Fairfax County Police Department. We're both tougher for it, but we're also more keenly aware of the stakes, of the lengths that people will go to harm people they disagree with. As these last few months have reminded us, public service is not for the faint of heart. I'm grateful everyone on this stage is willing to make these kinds of sacrifices to serve our community. Finally, Lashana Tova, from our family to yours, may this new year bring peace at home and in the world around us. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Cohen. And again, thank you to all 4 of our candidates for agreeing to participate in this forum. Your participation shows your willingness to communicate with voters. Thank you, viewers, for attending this candidate forum. We appreciate your interest in learning more about the candidates as you make your important voting decisions. Remember to engage in our democracy by voting. Have a great evening, and thank you for watching The Inside Scoop.